A blessed and a wonderful evening to everyone. We are here again not only to lift our voices and hearts to the Lord in worship, but as well to listen to His Word and learn from it that our lives will be well guided every day by the truth of the Lord. We will continue with our series, Family Frame, from God's point of view. How God looks at a family and what He desires for every family that belongs to Him. And last Sunday, we talked about the family as a unit that He graciously preserves. And today we will be looking at the family as a fortress that operates or that characterizes forgiveness within it. And so for our text this evening, we will be basing our meditation in the book of Genesis chapter 50, beginning with verse 1 up to verse 26. This is the entire chapter. And yet, for our reading, we would only read up to verse 18, 1 to 18. From the NASB 1995 edition, it says here, "Then Joseph fell on his father's face and wept over him and kissed him. Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father. So the physicians embalmed Israel. Now 40 days were required for it. For such is the period required for embalming, and the Egyptians wept for him 70 days. When the days of mourning for him were past, Joseph spoke to the household of Pharaoh, saying, I now have found favor, if now I have found favor in your sight, please speak to Pharaoh, saying, My father made me swear, saying, Behold, I am about to die. In my grave which I dug for myself in the land of Canaan, there you shall bury me. Now therefore, please let me go up and bury my father, then I will return. Pharaoh said, Go up and bury your father as he made you swear. So Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went up all the servants of Pharaoh, the elders of his household, and all the elders of the land of Egypt, and all the household of Joseph and his brothers and his father's household. They left only their little ones and their flocks and their herds in the land of Goshen. There also went up with him both chariots and horsemen, and it was a very great company. When they came to the threshing floor of Atad, which is beyond the Jordan, they lamented there with a very great and sorrowful lamentation. And he observed 7 days mourning for his father. Now when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning of the threshing floor of Atad, they said, This is a grievous mourning for the Egyptians. Therefore it was named Abel Mizraim, which is beyond the Jordan. Thus his sons did for him as he had charged them. For his sons carried him to the land of Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah before Mamre, which Abram had bought along with a field for a burial site from Ephron the Hittite. After he had buried his father, Joseph returned to Egypt, he and his brothers, and all who had gone up with him to bury his father. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? So they sent a message to Joseph, saying, Your father charged before he died, saying, Thus you shall say to Joseph, Please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. And Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Then his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, Behold, we are your servants. May the good Lord bless the reading of His word. There was a young boy who was asked by his mother, Boy, can you please sweep the floor? And the boy was a bit hesitant to do that because he was excited to play. Just a little boy at around 7 or 8 years old. But his mom insisted, You sweep the floor first. So he got the broom, At the back of his mind, 50% was convinced that he had to play right away. 50% of his brain tells him, no, you have to sweep the floor first. But he did. He swept the floor because he was scared of his mom. While he was sweeping the floor, he only cleaned those surfaces that were not covered. Those areas that were occupied by a chair, a table, he did not move them a bit. He just swept those areas that were not covered. Reaching the door of the living room, there was a rug, a doormat. And he never moved the doormat as well. So he continued sweeping until he finished. After doing so, he went back to his room, got his shoes, and then started running towards the door. But he kicked the doormat and it was displaced. When it was moved, it revealed that there was a candy wrapper beneath it. He thought quickly, shall I pick this up and throw it to the bin? Or I shall just hide it and cover it again with a rug. He chose the latter option. Instead of picking it up, dealing with the matter properly, and throwing it to the bin, he secretly pulled the rug back to its place and hid the wrapper underneath it. Well, that's a common thing that happens to children. It's so easy for them to hide things under the rug. But that situation figuratively can be a situation as well of adults. There are things that we experience in life such as pain, hurt, jealousy, disappointment, that instead of dealing with them directly and properly, there are many times that adults do the same. We hide them under the rug. And the problem with hiding things under the rug is that a time will come that those garbages, those disappointments, those pains, those hurts and wounds that we hide under without dealing them properly, they will not disappear in reality. What happens is that they will be hidden for some period, and yet in the proper time, they will come to the surface again. That's exactly the thing that happened to the brothers of Joseph. They did something wrong with this guy. What did they do? I will relate it to you in a while. Joseph buried his father after mourning for 70 days, and another 1 week when they were there at the burial site. And then after the burial, all of them went back to Goshen. When they were going back to Goshen, when they were back there already, his brothers convened. And they started talking about a possibility that scared them so much. Listen very carefully to the statement that was mentioned in verse 15. What if Joseph bears a grudge against us and pays us back in full for all the wrong which we did to him? Was this really happening in the heart and mind of Joseph? Was he planning to revenge against his siblings? Did he even think of destroying his siblings because of what they did to him? He was actually not thinking about that. They were scared and they were haunted of their past, triggered by the what if that they had in mind. Psychologists are right after all. There are many things that we are afraid of in this world that are actually not a reality. They are based on the what if. Sa Bisaya, basin. Okay ra nang mamasin ka on a positive note. Mayingon kag, basi di ay mahimo siyang gracious. But it was a basin on a negative note. Ang what if? What if? What if he bears a grudge against us and he will think of destroying us? And this fear that they felt was a reaction. Something triggered it. What triggered it? If you look at the immediate text that we are looking at, one thing that triggered it primarily was the death of their father Jacob. Maybe our brother Joseph did not revenge against us in the earlier part because he respects our dad so much, Jacob. Maybe his perception about our dad is that he is already growing old and he just needs to enjoy life this time, that he doesn't like for him to have some headache out of this trouble that we have caused from a long time ago. And this time that he is gone, this might be a moment for Joseph to execute his plan. Their father Jacob was dead already, and there was no one who would stop Joseph if he starts doing something that would take them into account what they did. Nobody could stop Joseph. After all, if you look at the earlier verses of the chapter, all of these verses, beginning with verse 1 up to verse 14, these verses are actually relating how powerful and influential Joseph was during this time. Let's look at these verses 1 to 14. Verses 2 to 3, you will find out that Joseph was influential to his servants. Not only to those individuals that were working directly under him, but even the embalmers, I believe. He was influential because he had the sympathy of all Egypt. You look at verses 4 to 6. Joseph was influential in the house of Pharaoh, and he received the favor from Pharaoh. The highest authority in the land of Egypt was Pharaoh. The second in authority in command was Joseph. Joseph, being second in the authority and power, gets the favor coming from Pharaoh. So if you go against this guy, you are going against the two most powerful people in the land of Egypt. You don't have any bout against these guys. So they were scared of a possibility that Joseph was just waiting for a moment to do something against them. Added to this, you look at verse 9. Joseph was influential even to the armies of Egypt. Why did I say that? When he marched toward the cemetery, the burial place of his father, chariots and horsemen were with him. If this guy would think of a coup, that's possible. He must be very influential, and his brothers thought about this. We are nothing against our brother Joseph. The next thing that triggered this fear that they had, you look at chapter 49. Jacob himself, before dying, he uttered oracles toward his sons. Different oracles, pronouncement of either blessing or destruction or bad condition. Among the 12 sons, 2 of them received an elaborated oracle with a good note coming from Jacob. One was Judah. The oracle of Jacob towards Judah was, you are a leader, natural ruler. And from your tribe, from your line, leaders of God's people will come out. True enough. You look at many of the kings that reigned over Israel, they came from the line of Judah. Another person that received an elaborated oracle from Jacob was Joseph. The oracle of Jacob to Joseph was that you have been blessed by God so much, and the blessing of the Lord will never stop. He will pour more on your life. And if you have the blessing of God, that would mean you have material things as well in that matter during those days. And alongside that is the authority and power over many people to surround you. And that triggered them further. Why were they scared of their brother Joseph? Despite the fact that the issue that they committed happened in chapter 37. We are looking at chapter 50, the last chapter of the book of Genesis. The problem that they did happened in chapter 37. Several chapters took place before this 50th chapter. And in each chapter of the Old Testament, usually, A chapter records not only a moment that happened within a day. Usually, a chapter may even relate events within a year or a decade. So if you look at these plenty of chapters between 37 to 50, they speak of plenty of years. How come that these brothers of Joseph still thought of those things that they did to him? What did they do to him? Just a bit of a recap for those who are not familiar of the story. Chapter 37, what happened? Joseph became like the favorite of Jacob. He treated him so well as a son, and then he gave him a colorful robe, a treatment that was considered to be special. His brothers became jealous of him, and they began to dislike him. Added to that, this Joseph had dreams 2 times. And in his dream, the message that he related with his brothers and even his parents was that a time will come that you will all bow down to me. How about that kind of dream? If a brother would tell you that and he is not the eldest, you would protest. You would not like it. You will begin to dislike the person who had that dream. And that's exactly what happened. Because they were jealous of him, they did not like him, they wanted to get rid of him. And what happened was that one day, they got the chance that they were waiting for. They sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites merchants that were traveling to Egypt. After selling him, they got his robe, tore it apart, stained it with the blood of an animal, and brought it to Jacob and told their father, "Dad, your favorite son is gone. Probably he was bitten or eaten by a wild beast." That is why you look at his clothes here, it's stained with blood. And when Jacob scrutinized those things, he said, "Probably you're right. My son is already dead." And for many decades, Jacob believed that Joseph was dead already. Joseph was brought to Egypt. What was seemingly to be a misfortune for him was actually God's orchestration to put him to a prime situation, a prime position in Egypt. When he became one of the greatest leaders of Egypt, a famine came. And his brothers who stayed in Canaan needed to look for a place where they could buy food. The only place where food was available back then was Egypt. And so they went to Egypt. They wanted to buy food. When they arrived there, Joseph recognized them. They did not recognize him because that was many years ago, around 22 years probably had passed. Joseph recognized them because how they appeared were just the same. Their way of clothing, their way of speaking, it was just the same. But Joseph transferred from a different culture to another kind of culture, which is the Egyptian culture, and he began to be immersed so much in that culture that his way of life changed. The way he dressed himself up changed. The way he appeared before the public changed. So they could not recognize him anymore, but he was able to recognize them. While they were doing the transaction, Joseph revealed to them who he was. And he said to them, "I am Joseph." Okay lang sana if he stopped with that statement. But there is a continuation to that statement. If you look at chapter 45, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, chapter 45. Joseph revealed himself to them. And he said, "I am Joseph." And there was a continuation to that statement. "I am Joseph, the one you sold." It reminded them of what they did. And then after which, Joseph told them, "You go back to our father." He kissed them, each one of them, and he told them, "You go back to our father and bring him here, also with my younger brother Benjamin." And that took place. They brought the family to Goshen. They occupied Goshen for themselves. And for a long period, they were there until Jacob became old, until he died. So look at that situation. They were living there for many years, and yet the issue that they did in the past remains. Why is that so? Other than the fact that it was triggered, what was the main reason why it was still there? why it kept on lingering in their hearts and minds. And I found out the reason in the entire narrative. And this is so significant. If you look at verse 17 in particular, let's read verse 17. It says here, they crafted a device telling Joseph that our father, as part of his last will and testament before he died, he said this to us to tell you about this. They said to him, thus you shall say to Joseph, please forgive, take note, please forgive, I beg you, the transgression of your brothers and their sin, for they did you wrong. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. Please forgive. 2 times that statement was mentioned in verse 17. Please forgive, with matching a strong appeal that says, I beg you. Please forgive. And you know what? For more than 22 years, this word, forgive, never came out of the mouth of his brothers. It never came out of their mouth. When they first met Joseph, when they visited Egypt to buy food, when Joseph told them, I am Joseph, the one you sold, the appropriate response that they shall have given him was that fear and apology. Fear and the word sorry. Fear and the word forgive us for what we did. That was supposedly the immediate response that they had given him. But you look at the text in chapter 45, there was no sorry, no forgive us. Out of fear, they shall have knelt down before him or embraced him and said to him, brother, we were still young back then. Our minds were not formed properly in the way we would deal with life. We were jealous of what you were back then. We became angry of you, but this time we realized that what we did was wrong. Forgive us. Sorry for what we have done. They never said those words. And then after doing so, they acquainted with themselves once again, and then Joseph went to them one after the other. You know what he did? In those chapters that I've mentioned, Joseph kissed them one after the other. He kissed his brothers one after the other. And Joseph's kiss was different from Judah's kiss. Judah's kiss was a kiss of betrayal. But Joseph's kiss was his way of telling his brothers, I miss you, my brothers. I have thought of you for so long. I wanted to be reconnected with you. I want to know what happened to you all throughout these years. I am an open heart this time in your presence. He kissed them. But did they say sorry? Did they say forgive us? The text never mentioned those words. In other words, they did not deal the issue in a proper way. They placed what happened under the rug. They just set it aside. And so Joseph told them, you go back to our land and call our father. Tell our father that I'm alive. You have all these gifts to bring with you so that this would serve as a proof that you really saw me here and that I have dealt with you kindly. And so they went back to Jacob and told him, Father, your son, whom you have thought is dead already, is alive. We met him in Egypt. Jacob couldn't believe it. He actually didn't believe right away. But with those gifts that were sent by Joseph to them, he believed in them. And so the entire family went to Egypt. But listen very carefully. What should be the response, or how should they have given the news to Jacob? During the time when they went back home and talked to Jacob about the living Joseph, they should have told him, Father, we lied to you. This is the real thing that happened. We were so jealous of Joseph back then that your attention was on him and we felt neglected. And you treated him so well that we felt so bad about it. And so we wanted to get rid of him. So we sold him to the merchants. And the robe that we presented to you with blood, everything was made up. We just made him up just to make you believe that he's dead and you wouldn't look for him anymore. Sorry. Forgive us for what we did. They never said those words. They never said those words. For more than 2 decades, or even 3 or 4 decades, because the last verse in this chapter tells us that Joseph died at the age 110. For many, many decades, they just put under the rug the issue that they have committed. They never said sorry. And I really wonder why this word sorry is too heavy and too hard to speak of, too heavy to release. And the reason that I found out, pride. Why would I say sorry? Why would I do that? In the first place, we were the ones offended. In the first place, Dad played favoritism. He was to be blamed about all this. Why is sorry so difficult to be released? Because it takes a repentant heart and a humble heart to utter sorry. It's difficult to say that, but after many decades, finally, Joseph heard from the very lips of his brother, despite the fact that it was not a direct statement that they uttered before him, but as if it was their father telling Joseph that they were sorry and they needed forgiveness. That was the time, for the very first time, that Joseph heard from the mouth of his brothers that they needed forgiveness. All the while, after many decades, they lived with Joseph. But the wounds caused by the guilt deep within their hearts and minds remained. For all those years. Why did it remain? Why were they haunted? Because they did not deal with the matter properly. They put it under the rug. It takes a repentant heart. It takes a humble heart to say sorry. It takes sorry to receive forgiveness. It takes forgiveness to experience healing. I'll repeat. It takes a humble heart and a repentant heart to say sorry. It takes sorry to receive forgiveness. It takes forgiveness to experience healing. All the while, his brothers were boggled, disturbed by what they did in the past because they failed to deal with the matter. And how many families are disintegrating in our time today because we failed to deal with the issues in the past and we just put them under the rug. Just like that candy cellophane placed beneath the rug. We do it many times. Why would I say sorry? And because sorry is not released, forgiveness is hidden as well from the culprit. There are many families that are not getting along well because that word sorry is too hard to be spoken of by someone who committed a mistake. It's hard to humble down. It's hard. It's hard to take the position of humility. Sorry is just a brief word, spelled with few letters only, but it is too hard to utter. Without realizing that sorry is a means by which forgiveness can be received. Forgiveness is the medicine that brings cure to a guilty heart. In the absence of sorry, even if the victim has silently forgiven already, the heart of the offender remains unsettled, anxious, and unhealed. Take note of that. And that is why if your family today is not getting along well, maybe this is the time for the one who is guilty to take the position of humility and come back home. Tell your mom, I have done something wrong. Forgive me. Maybe it's a right time for you to approach your dad and tell him, Dad, I'm sorry I disappointed you. Or maybe it's time for a parent who committed mistake as well to go to their sons and daughters and tell them, my child, we are adults already. We committed mistakes. Sorry that we did not become a good example before you. Sorry. Or maybe it's between siblings that it's time for you to say, Ate, Kuya, pasaylo ako sa kong sala. Or manghud, I did not become a good example to you, forgive me. There are many families today that are not getting along well because many failed to ask for forgiveness. Many failed and finds it so hard to say sorry because of pride. And if you want your family to remain intact or to experience mending according to God's will, sorry is a necessity. Because sorry is a means to receive forgiveness. Forgiveness is a necessity to experience healing. Healing is important for a family to be well, to be peaceful, and to live as a light in this dark world. You know, this is just a simple message for all of us. And if you ask me, what's my greatest wish? Maybe this is one of my greatest prayers for every family represented here in Zikaek, both who are here in the sanctuary and those joining us online, that we will begin to embrace the culture of saying sorry, that we may create a home that releases forgiveness. May we embrace the culture of saying sorry with genuineness in the heart, and that we may create a home that releases forgiveness to an offender. Peace in the home will never happen if healing will not take place. Healing will never happen if forgiveness is not released. Forgiveness will never be received if sorry will not be uttered. It's important that we deal with these matters, the wrong things done, the hurts, the wounds that were created in the past. May we deal with them properly. And it starts only by saying, sorry, I have done something wrong. It's my prayer that every one of us would exercise this. If somehow there was a hurt in you, or somehow you have disappointed a member of the family and they are away, you can reach them through Messenger. You can call them. You can send them a letter if you are an old school. And if you receive one, may we be found like Joseph, who is willing to release it. And then after verse 18, Joseph wept when he heard all of those things that his brothers told him. And he said, don't be afraid. 2 times he mentioned this word, don't be afraid. They were scared of him. Don't be afraid. I'll take care of your needs and your family. His provision that he granted toward his siblings, they serve as warrant of the forgiveness that he released for them. And their family lived peacefully until Joseph died. It's my prayer that you will experience what they experience after this turmoil in their family. Shall we bow down our heads for prayer? Our Father in heaven, we are grateful to you for this reminder that you have given us today. And we are guilty as well, for there are many problems that we encountered in life that we haven't dealt with properly. Some of them were placed under the rug. And in your appointed time, those issues that were hidden will come to the surface once again. And sometimes we are not even aware that they are influencing the way we think. They are influencing the way we behave and the way we relate with people around, the way we respond, the way we react. Sometimes we are unaware of these happenings at the back of our mind. But today, this is the time that you have appointed for us to deal with matters properly. And if it is us who committed this wrong, may you give us a heart positioned in humility, that we may be able to utter the word, sorry, I have committed a mistake. It's an honest, genuine statement that must come from a repentant heart, dear God. And if we were the ones offended, may we be like Joseph as well, who said, am I in the place of God? That God himself, despite the fact that he was offended many times, he was willing to release forgiveness. And this points to our position before God, that we are just sinners. We are sinners forgiven by the perfect God. And yet here we are, sometimes finding it so hard to release forgiveness because of the wound that we have. But today, when we find someone with a repentant heart saying sorry, may we respond releasing forgiveness as well. Because it is only then that hearts are mended, relationships are brought together, and it would pave the way for a family that would create a home for everyone. Dear Lord, help us to bring this into our lives. Help us. Without your prompting, without your work in our hearts and minds, this is too difficult to do. But we know that you are enabling each one of us. Thank you for your word today. Lead us, guide us, and we entrust to you everything that we are. In your name we pray, and everybody will say to God, amen and amen. Good evening, everyone, and the Lord bless you all.